December 15, 2087, the astronaut's log. I still remember the feeling of weightlessness as our ship, Aurora, broke free from Earth's gravitational pull. Our crew of 6 had been training for this mission for years, and finally we were on our way to explore the distant galaxy. Our destination was a planet codenamed Nix IV, rumored to have conditions similar to those of Neptune. The excitement was palpable as we entered the unknown. Dr. Patel, our chief scientist, had spent countless hours studying the planet's unique atmospheric properties. She had convinced us that Nix IV held secrets worth uncovering. As we journeyed deeper into space, the stars became our only companions. The silence was almost deafening, punctuated only by the hum of engines and the occasional beep from our ship's computer. Our crew consisted of seasoned astronauts: Captain Lewis, Commander Sarah Jenkins, Engineer Tom Bradley, Dr. Patel, Biologist Lisa Nguyen, and myself, Lieutenant Michael Reyes. I had been assigned as the ship's navigator and communications officer. On the 20th day of our journey, we entered Nix IV's orbit. The planet's icy blue hue filled our view screen, a stark contrast to the vibrant colors of Earth. Our crew was abuzz with excitement and anticipation. We began our descent, carefully navigating through the treacherous atmosphere. As we landed on the frozen surface, I couldn't shake off the feeling that we were being watched. The landing site was a vast, barren expanse of snow and ice, stretching as far as the eye could see. The cold air bit at our suits like 1,000 knives, but we knew it was worth it for the secrets Nix IV held. We began to deploy our equipment, setting up base camp near the landing site. As night fell on Nix IV, the sky transformed into a canvas of stars and moonlight, casting an ethereal glow over the frozen landscape. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I gazed out at the alien world we had become the masters of. January 10, 2087, the astronaut's log. We finally set foot on Nix IV's surface, our boots sinking into the powdery snow like knives. The landscape stretched out before us, an endless expanse of white that seemed to swallow all sound and color. Our initial excitement gave way to a sense of unease as we realized how small we were in this vast, frozen world. Commander Jenkins called a team meeting to discuss our plan of action. We gathered around the makeshift conference table, our suits' life support systems humming softly in the background. Dr. Patel outlined her research on Nix IV's unique properties, explaining how the planet's atmosphere was capable of preserving ancient artifacts for millions of years. Our mission was to explore the ruins that had been detected by satellite imagery. The coordinates were vague, but we knew it was worth a shot. We spent the next few hours preparing our equipment and checking our gear. As the sun began to set on Nix IV, we set off towards the unknown. The journey was grueling, our suits' temperature controls struggling to keep us warm in the sub-zero environment. The snow crunched beneath our boots, sending tiny avalanches down nearby slopes. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being herded towards some unseen destination. As we trudged through the wilderness, our headlamps casting eerie shadows on the snow, I caught glimpses of strange rock formations in the distance. They seemed to defy gravity, twisting and curling like living things. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized that these were no natural formations. We reached the edge of a vast impact crater, its rim stretching out before us like a frozen moat. The air was heavy with an otherworldly silence, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. We exchanged uneasy glances, our hearts pounding in unison. "Commander," Dr. Patel whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "I think we're not alone here." I turned to her, my eyes scanning the horizon, and that's when I saw it. January 12, 2087, the astronaut's log. We began our exploration of the crater's rim, our suits creaking and groaning as we navigated the treacherous terrain. The wind howled around us, threatening to sweep us off our feet at any moment. I clutched my headlamp tightly, the beam casting an eerie glow on the snow-covered rocks. As we ventured deeper into the crater, I started to notice strange symbols etched into the surface. They seemed to pulse with a faint blue light, as if they were alive. Dr. Patel's eyes widened in excitement as she examined the markings, her gloved hands moving with precision over the ancient text. "What do you make of this?" she called out, her voice barely audible over the wind. I peered at the symbols, my mind racing with possibilities. "It looks like some sort of language," I replied, "but I've never seen anything like it before." Commander Jenkins approached us, her suit's life support system humming softly in the background. "Let's not get too caught up in this," she cautioned. "We have a job to do." But Dr. Patel was undeterred, her eyes shining with an unholy enthusiasm. "This is it," she whispered, her voice full of awe. "This is what we've been searching for." As we continued our exploration, the symbols seemed to grow more frequent, covering the walls of the crater like a twisted, alien script. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being drawn into some sort of trap, that the planet itself was manipulating us towards some unknown fate. And then, without warning, the wind died down, the snow stopped falling, and in the sudden silence I heard it, a low, thrumming hum, like the heartbeat of the planet itself. January 14, 2087, the astronaut's log. We stumbled upon an ancient structure hidden deep within the crater's interior. The entrance was guarded by a pair of twisted, granite pillars that seemed to writhe and twist in the flickering light of our suits' headlamps. As we approached, I could feel a malevolent presence lurking just out of sight, watching us with cold, calculating eyes. Commander Jenkins cautiously led the way inside, her gun at the ready. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy, making my skin crawl. We found ourselves in a vast, cavernous space filled with ancient artifacts and relics. And then, we saw them ancient texts etched into the walls, pulsing with a faint blue light. Dr. Patel's eyes widened as she examined the texts, her gloved hands moving with precision over the ancient script. "This is it," she whispered, her voice full of awe. "This is the lost language of the Solari." As we delved deeper into the texts, I started to notice strange symbols and markings that seemed to match the ones etched into the crater's surface. It was as if we had stumbled upon a hidden code, one that held the secrets of the planet itself. But as we read on, the energy in the room began to shift. The air grew colder, the shadows deepening and twisting around us like living things. I knew then that we were not alone on this planet, and that we had disturbed something that was meant to remain hidden. January 16, 2087, the astronaut's log. We spent the next few days poring over the ancient texts, trying to decipher their secrets. Dr. Patel's knowledge of the Solari language proved invaluable as we slowly began to unravel the mysteries of Solomonic magic. As we delved deeper into the texts, we discovered that the Solari had been a highly advanced civilization, possessing technologies and magical abilities beyond our wildest imagination. Their magic was based on the manipulation of energy and matter at a fundamental level, allowing them to create complex spells and incantations that could bend reality to their will. But as we read on, we began to realize that the Solari's power came at a terrible cost. Their magic was fueled by human sacrifice, and their rituals were designed to harness the life force of those who participated. Commander Jenkins was deeply disturbed by what we had discovered, and she made it clear that we would not be following in the Solari's footsteps. We vowed to use our knowledge for good, to unlock the secrets of their magic without resorting to such atrocities. But as we worked on unlocking the secrets of the Solomonic texts, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. That unblinking eyes were trained on us from the shadows, waiting for us to make a wrong move. The symbols on the walls seemed to be shifting, rearranging themselves into new patterns and designs. It was as if they were trying to convey a message, but in a language I couldn't understand. And then one night I saw it, a figure standing just beyond the edge of perception, watching us with cold, calculating eyes. As the days passed, the crew of the spaceship began to feel a growing sense of unease. It started with small things, a misplaced tool, a forgotten memory, a strange noise in the night. But as time went on, the occurrences became more frequent and more intense. Equipment would malfunction without explanation, and some crew members began to act strangely, as if they were being controlled by an outside force. Dr. Patel was the first to suspect that something was wrong. She had been studying the ancient texts too closely, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were trying to tell her something. She became withdrawn and isolated, spending long hours in the ship's library, poring over the pages of the Solari texts. As the days turned into weeks, the rest of the crew began to feel the effects of Dr. Patel's isolation. They started to whisper among themselves, wondering if she had finally gone mad from studying the ancient texts too closely. But I knew better. I could see it in her eyes, a spark of knowledge that burned brighter with every passing day. And I knew that she was on the verge of something incredible, something that could change the course of human history forever. And then one night we saw it. A figure standing just beyond the edge of perception, watching us with cold, calculating eyes. It was as if the ancient texts had finally revealed their secret, and it was not what we had expected. January 20, 2087, the astronaut's log. We started to experience strange occurrences on a daily basis. Equipment would malfunction, and strange noises could be heard in the night. But it wasn't until we encountered the first supernatural entity that we realized the true nature of our mission. As I was walking through the ship's corridors, I saw Dr. Patel standing in front of a console, her eyes fixed on a screen. She didn't seem to notice me at first, but as I approached, she turned to face me. "What are you doing?" I asked her, feeling a sense of unease. "I am trying to communicate with the entity," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I was taken aback. "Which entity?" I asked her. "The one that is watching us," she replied. "The one that is trying to tell us something." I looked around, but there was no one in sight. "What do you mean?" I asked her. "I mean the entity that is beyond this world," she replied. "The one that is using our ship as a vessel." As we continued to talk, I started to feel a presence around me. It was as if something was watching us, waiting for us to make a wrong move. Suddenly, the lights in the corridor began to flicker, and the air grew cold. I knew then that we were not alone on this ship. "What do you want from us?" I asked Dr. Patel, my voice shaking with fear. "I don't know," she replied, her eyes fixed on the screen. "But I think it's trying to communicate with us." And then everything went black. When I came to, I was lying in my bunk, feeling disoriented and confused. The ship was quiet, and the only sound was the hum of the engines. But as I looked around, I knew that something had changed. The entity was still out there, watching us, and I knew that we were running out of time. January 22, 2087, the astronauts log. We ventured outside onto the snowy surface of the planet, our suits protecting us from the harsh environment. But as we trudged through the drifts, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being herded towards some unknown fate. Dr. Patel seemed oblivious to my concerns, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She was searching for something, but what? And then she saw it, a shape looming in the distance. As we drew closer, I realized it was a figure shrouded in shadows. It moved towards us, its pace slow and deliberate. We stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. The figure drew nearer, its features becoming more defined. It was one of my crewmates, but his eyes were black as coal and his skin was deathly pale. He reached out a hand and I flinched in fear, but Dr. Patel didn't move. She simply stared at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fascination and horror. And then he spoke. His voice was low and raspy, like the rustling of dry leaves. "I have been waiting for you," he said. "You have something that belongs to me." I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized what was happening. The entity had taken one of our own crewmates, and it was now demanding something from us in exchange for his safe return. We were trapped on this planet with no way out, and the entity would stop at nothing to get what it wanted. As the days passed, the team's situation grew more and more desperate. We were trapped on a desolate planet with an entity that seemed to be toying with us. Dr. Patel was obsessed with unlocking the secrets of the ancient texts, while Commander Jenkins was determined to find a way off the planet. But as the days turned into weeks, we began to lose our grip on reality. The entity's presence seemed to be seeping into our minds, driving us mad with fear and paranoia. Dr. Patel became convinced that the entity was trying to communicate with her, and she spent hours alone in her quarters, staring at the ancient texts. Commander Jenkins, on the other hand, became convinced that one of our own crewmates was working against us, and she began to suspect everyone around her. I tried to stay sane, but it was no use. The entity's presence was everywhere, watching me, waiting for me to make a wrong move. One by one, we started to crack. Dr. Patel became convinced that the entity was speaking to her through the ancient texts, and she began to dictate messages to us in a wild, rambling voice. Commander Jenkins became convinced that I was working against her, and she tried to sedate me. The ship's computer, which had once been our lifeline, now seemed like a cold, calculating enemy. We were trapped on a desolate planet with no way out, and the entity was laughing at us as we descended into madness. As the team's descent into madness reached its peak, we realized that we had to confront the entity head-on. We gathered our strength and prepared for a final showdown. Dr. Patel, now completely consumed by her obsession with the ancient texts, led the charge. She stormed into the heart of the entity's lair, armed with nothing but her knowledge and determination. Commander Jenkins followed close behind, her eyes blazing with a fierce anger. I trailed behind them, my heart racing with fear. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy as we approached the entity's throne room. The walls seemed to writhe and twist around us, like living tendrils of darkness. Dr. Patel stopped at the entrance, her eyes fixed on the entity. "You will not take us," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. The entity regarded her calmly, its presence seeming to fill the entire room. "I have been waiting for you," it said, its voice like a cold wind. "You have meddled in affairs that are beyond your understanding." Dr. Patel stood tall, her eyes flashing with defiance. "We will not be intimidated," she said. Commander Jenkins stepped forward, her gun drawn. "We're here to take you down," she growled. The entity laughed, a sound that shook the very foundations of reality, and then it spoke. Its voice was like a storm, a maelstrom of fury and destruction. "You are but mere insects," it spat. Insignificant creatures." Dr. Patel took a step forward, her eyes blazing with determination. "We will not be defeated," she said. The entity laughed again, its presence seeming to grow more intense. And then everything went black. As I came to, I found myself alone in the darkness. The entity was gone, but the ship's computer was still active. I stumbled out of my quarters and staggered through the corridors, desperate to find some sign of life. But there was nothing. No one. Just me, alone on a desolate planet with no way off. Dr. Patel was nowhere to be found, and Commander Jenkins was missing too. I frantically searched for any clue as to what had happened to them, but there was nothing. No messages, no recordings, no signs of struggle or violence. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. And then I saw it. The ship's log, flickering on the console in front of me. It was the final entry from Commander Jenkins herself. "I'm sorry," she wrote. "I have to leave you behind." I felt a cold dread creeping up my spine as I read the words. What had happened? Why had she left me? I scrolled through the log, searching for answers, but there were none. Just a steady stream of code and data, like a countdown to oblivion. And then it hit me. The truth. Commander Jenkins had been working with the entity all along. She had made a deal with it, traded our survival for some twisted purpose of her own. I was left alone on this frozen planet with no way off, while she and Dr. Patel were spirited away to who knew where. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I was truly, utterly, and completely abandoned. I stood on the icy surface of the planet, my eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of life. But there was nothing. No ship, no crewmates, no hope. Just me, alone in the darkness. The entity's presence still lingered, a cold and malevolent force that seemed to seep into my very soul. I knew then that I was trapped in an unending nightmare, with no escape from the horrors that surrounded me. The planet itself seemed to be alive, its frozen surface writhing and twisting like a living thing. The wind howled through the void, a cacophony of despair that echoed through my mind. And then I saw it, a figure in the distance trudging across the ice towards me. It was Dr. Patel, her eyes vacant and her skin pale. She didn't seem to notice me at first, just kept walking with an unnatural gait. But as she drew closer, I saw that something was wrong. Her face was twisted into a grotesque grimace, her mouth open in a silent scream. And then she spoke. "We have to get out of here," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "The entity is waiting for us." I stumbled after her, my heart racing with fear. We trudged across the ice, our footsteps echoing through the void. But every step felt like a betrayal, as if we were being drawn further into the heart of madness. The planet seemed to be shifting and twisting around us, its surface rippling like a living thing. I knew then that we were trapped in an unending nightmare, with no escape from the horrors that surrounded us. And then everything went black.